All right, guys, thank you for joining us on the rest round. Today we've got Ryan Carroll from Parkersburg. He's getting ready to go to where's your fight at, Ryan? I know it's Midwest somewhere.
Iowa, of all places.
Iowa. So he's got it's a boxing match, right?
Yeah.
So he's got a boxing match coming up in Iowa. We're going to talk to him about that today. Probably going to get into a little bit of the Dean Lister seminar that's coming up next Sunday at noon over at Butch Hiles, and just kind of catch up with each other. Both me and Ryan are brown belts under Butch, and we've trained together for a little bit. And so just kind of catching up and talking about his fight coming up. So Ryan, how you been, man?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Actually better than what I have. I've just been training a lot harder for this fight and just trying to stay healthy. You know,
I seen the other day you put in like 10 miles running, and you were doing push-ups with tires on your back, and yeah, like reminded me of Rocky when he went and fought Drago.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. Honestly, it's been really fun this fight camp because for some reason my last pretty much 2 or 3 last fight camps, excuse me, they were like last minute fight ordeals. So they gave me like 2 weeks notice on those last few fights. So this one I actually had the fun time of they give me, I think, like, I don't know, 7 weeks out or something like that. So I've actually had a pretty long fight camp this time, longer than any of the others I've had in probably the last 4 years or so. So it's been pretty nice.
So, Ryan, what are you changing up that's a little bit different? Obviously, for people that don't know, Ryan's one of the guys that, and quite honestly, just for really everybody, I think this is kind of the motto that most of our people at our gyms live by, is that we do a little bit of everything, right? Meaning that, especially Ryan here, he competes, he'd compete he's competed in combat jiu-jitsu, regular jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, MMA, you name it, probably some, but if we ask you, you're going to do it, right? Which is cool. And so when I first started my gym way back when, I used to call it advanced boxing, kickboxing, and jiu-jitsu. One, to be honest, advanced was an A, and that's back when you used phone books. So I thought that would put us back in the beginning of the phone book. But the other part was that we were doing boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, and combine them together, and that makes MMA. And I prided our gym on competing in all those things, that we weren't just, for example, an MMA gym or a boxing gym or a kickboxing gym. I told everybody, hey, compete in all of them. Even if you're an MMA fighter in your off time, go compete in these things, sharpen your skills, and go from there. And Ryan embodies that in the new, the 2020s, right? I mean, we were doing that back in the 90s, but there's not a lot of people doing that. Just like kids sports, people are specializing now, and kids do just basketball or just soccer. And there's a lot of studies to say that's not smart, right? But yeah, so you're actually out there living the dream, doing the thing. So now you have a boxing fight. Is it just the fact that that's what you're offered, or what's going on with that?
Well, as well as I do, the MMA community does not pay very well at all. And honestly, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always enjoyed boxing. It's not my quote unquote forte. I started boxing when I was like 10 or 11. And as MMA grew throughout the years, it kind of declined on the boxing side. But yeah, as of lately, it's weird, man. Like, for some reason, especially at my age, right? Like, a 40-year-old in the boxing community is not really that old, but a 40-year-old in the MMA community is like dinosaurs. Like, it's really weird. So me trying to get a fight for MMA is, I don't know, it seems really it's way more difficult. But as far as like
West Virginia, or is that everywhere? Is that here or everywhere? Or, I mean, obviously you're in Parkersburg, but I mean,
right.
And so for people that don't know, I know that, for example, just to kind of tell people that the background for all of us, sometimes, for example, in West Virginia, I live in Charleston, as a 40-year-old fighter, as an older, and how old are you, Ryan, by the way?
40.
40. sometimes you have to get certain medicals that you don't have to get as a younger guy, right? You have to have CT scans, a lot of stuff that, quite frankly, just gonna be honest, like usually fighters don't have the money to get that, because there's a reason you're a fighter. You have a hard life, and you know, that's not everybody, but a lot of these guys, this is their life, right? They're giving all they got, and they've quit their jobs, and they're doing everything they have. And now all of a sudden, just to compete, they want you to have a CAT scan, which is thousands of dollars, you know, on top of insurance and whatever other medicals. I mean, I guess you know better than me. I just know that it made it pretty tough. And I had some older fighters that couldn't compete because they just couldn't get those things done. They didn't have the money, and there was nobody that was going to pay for it. And it gets tough, man.
It's crazy. Like West Virginia's rules compared to maybe Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, you know, all of them are so like nobody's on the same uh thinking at all.
Absolutely.
You know, like Maryland, I think they wanted me to have like all these CT, MRI, EKGs, blood work, ophthalmics, like I mean, $4,000 or $5,000 worth of stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, versus maybe Florida, all you gotta have is like you know blood work and an eye exam, you know, or like Iowa, all I gotta do is have blood work and a physical.
Well,
It's crazy.
yeah, and then some states that are more fighting states, like say New Jersey, if you're fighting Atlantic City, they want all those things, but because they're more of a fighting state, they make it pretty easy for you. They've got centers that you can go for or go to get these tests done, and they're severely discounted. Like a couple $1,000 CAT scan is now like $40, right? They understand that fighters don't have money, and man, they do a great job. But that all being said, that's a fighting state, you know, and again, it's been a while, you know, since I had some fighters in Atlantic City, but I know that they had some tough rules, but they made it achievable. They didn't make it like, hey, you get this done, and if you don't get it done, you can't fight, and I'm not going to worry about it, right? That's kind of goofy, right? So, um, is Iowa working with you a little bit? Are they
Oh,
pretty good,
yeah.
or yeah,
Iowa and Pennsylvania, I think, are probably right now the two easiest states for me to fight in. Because every, you know, I'm offered a fight, you know, a couple times out of the week, and I that's always my first question. I'm like, look, guys, I'm 40 years old, just so you know, and you know, what kind of medicals do I have to be able to fight in your state? And you know, that's like the biggest thing. It- it- and so, and that kind of goes back to like you know the differences in between the MMA and the boxing world, as far as like why I choose one versus the other. You know, yeah, boxing, it's going to pay more, um, and you know the craziest thing, like I'm sure you've seen like boxers, they'll be like maybe 5 wins and 36 losses,
yeah,
and they can still fight
I,
versus like MMA. You know, MMA you could have like a 1-3 record, and they'll be like, "Sorry, guy, you can't fight here."
yeah, and you know, for another story too, just so you guys like, when I first started MMA in West Virginia, just for a backstory real quick to make the story short, but look, we passed it, right, and for a long, and this was in the last 10-15 years, but West Virginia and New York were the last two states to have MMA illegal in. So even though we passed it, they made it extremely difficult to actually throw a show. And exactly what you just said is one of the things. And that was my argument, because the same commission that I would put two good fighters together, two good, and I knew it would be a good fighter because you know, I'm part of the MMA world and MMA community, and I would know these people. I'm like, all right, this is a good fight. For example, I think one of the fights I had was Sean Salmon from the UFC, former UFC fighter, hadn't fought in a while, versus Brandon Lee Hinkle, also from the UFC, right? It was just like a good marquee matchup of two 205ers, probably heavyweights at that time, that were former UFC fighters. It just seemed like a good main event with two solid guys that people like to see. They did not approve the fight because of the record. And I don't obviously know what the record was, but it wasn't that far off. And I knew that would be a great fight. And I was like, and that was my exact same thing. I was like, listen, man, I have seen you guys have a 30-0 champion fight an 0-99 boxer. Now I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not that far off. I swear to God, I've seen it. And I've seen 0-30 guys go against champions. And they were like, well, yeah, well, those are fight builders. I'm like, that's my point. Like you're saying, you're admitting that this guy can fight this bum, And just like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, you had glass jaw, right? The first Glass Joe, not jaw, but yeah, you had glass. It was the same thing. And they would know it. And they were like, well, those guys are journeymen. With MMA, they can get hurt. I'm like, well, that's the dumbest thing. Like anyway. But these are also all boxing commissioners that were trying to run MMA, and there was an ulterior motive. They were trying to do stuff. But it used to bother me to no end because I would have a great card and let's say 15 fights, maybe 20, and you're hoping you get 10 at the end, and they're dropping them left and right, saying, well, this is a bad matchup. I'm like, who are you to tell me it's a bad matchup, right? Like, and the fights were like, and I swear to God, I was my thought process when I was making a show back then too, as a promoter, was to make a professional level entertaining fight. I was not trying to get Ryan Carroll an easy win, right? Like, even if you were my fighter at the time, like that was not my thing. Because I'm like, well, if I want people to come back to this show and pay money to come to the show, I want them to be entertained. I want solid fights, right? And I also didn't, knowing that I have a gym, I didn't want people to say, hey, well, Butch Hiles set those up because he knows that guy. And like, I was fully aware of all the nonsense that would probably happen. So I probably went and bent over backwards to make good fights, and I still got them cut out. All that being said, wow, I know for a fact. And listen, I could go on and on about this. But I've been in fights in West Virginia where 100% everybody knew. I'm just going to let this out there, and nobody's going to get in trouble. But teams from Cleveland would come down. All the fighters would switch their names. Like, this guy would say, hey, I'm Jerome Smith. And his real name's like, Bill Smith, whatever. But the point was they were taking dives, every one of them. So 4 guys would come from Cleveland. They'd change their name so that they could lose to the 4 guys from West Virginia. And everybody knew this was going on. Like, everybody knew. Like, it was so ridiculous. But look, I don't want to get into all that. Ryan and Gary and I have been around this sport for decades and decades. I've seen the nonsense. I've had to fight through the nonsense. But we're getting past that. But we still have to deal with it to a certain degree. But I will also say, like you said, not to, I am kind of jumping all over the place, but Iowa is a great fight place. Obviously, Pat Miletich and Davenport, Iowa fighting systems has been one of the best. We had a guy named Bill Dexter that competed there, won an IKF world title. IKF used to have the big kickboxing championships down there forever, which would be like a 2 or 3 ring thing, multiple fights going on one time. Amazing thing. So Iowa, like you said, I'm not surprised that they're taking care of you, doing what's right. Unfortunately, we still have states, screwing people over, whether it's age or just not, old boxing guys trying to beat on MMA guys for whatever it is. But yeah, here you are, right? Like, I know I get off on a tangent, but man, there's so many bad things I've seen through the years. And anyway, whenever it's brought up, my brain goes,
and I'm not stupid. I mean, honestly, I am a 40-year-old man, and all the guys that I've fought recently, they're all like 18, 19, 20 years old, So, and I kind of how, like you were saying, they probably more than likely sought me out. Absolutely. In aspect. They're like, oh, it's a 40-year-old guy. We got an up and coming prospect. We want to kind of try to pad his record and give him a little bit of an easier win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you know that, though, right? Like, it doesn't mean anything bad, but it's the fact of the matter. If you're going to Iowa, you're going to Iowa to lose, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It is, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean that's what you're going to do, but that's what they think. They picked a guy they think they can beat. I mean, because that was the thing. And obviously we're together and we're fighters, but that's exactly what I would tell everybody getting ready for a fight. I was like, and that's what I use for encouragement as motivation. We're going in to lose this fight, or they picked you because they think you're easy, and then bam, bam, motivation. So same words I'm saying right now is what I would say that night, right? So get ready.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of what a little bit of my motivation is behind this, because, I've had a longer fight camp, and I kind of don't want to, be that guy, so in the same token, I want to go up there and make a statement, I don't plan on losing to this little guy. And, I want to make a statement and knock his ass out and show him, I'm not just a pushover for somebody to pad the record on.
Not to take, we'll come back to that, because I don't think you're a pushover and I don't think you're somebody to pad the record on. But going back to the age thing, that's a big reason that I never got, I started jiu-jitsu a little bit later in life. I was 31. going towards 32 before I got started, and I'm 40 now. By the time I felt comfortable, all the stuff that you were talking about, the CAT scans in Ohio, after you're 36, you have to get all that stuff done. And so you have to have a CAT scan and blood work and all these tests. And it was not cost efficient for me to do it. And then on top of that, I had my wife saying, it's probably not a good idea. You got 2 kids you got to raise. So maybe try and keep them, the brains you have, not scrambled. So there was enough in the way to stop me from doing it. And I always thought it was crazy because I would go to these pro-am MMA contests and they would be picking guys out of the line that we were going in to see. And it was like, that dude's got neck tattoos. He'll probably fight. Let's ask him if he wants one. And so it's always amazing to me that, like, you know, at that point, I was like 7 years deep in 7 years deep in jiu-jitsu. And I was like, man, all the hoops that I have to jump through if I want to do an MMA fight. And some guy can be 26 years old, not know anything, and get himself an amateur fight. It just seemed crazy to me. I'm a purple belt at jiu-jitsu. I'm Ohio State purple belt champion at heavyweight. And that was the weight above what I was actually competing at. I was champion at 2 levels. And it was like, you guys aren't going to let me fight, but you'll let this dude off the street do something. It was crazy to me.
Yeah, I haven't fought in Ohio probably for, I think it's been, 7 years. I think it's the last time I was allowed to fight in Ohio because of that reason. They said after I was 35, they're like, well, the only way you can fight in Ohio ever again is he also has to be around your age. He has to be above 35 or 36. And then you also have to have all these thousands of dollars in medicals. And I was like, I will never fight in Ohio ever again. It was easier to fight in Los Angeles than it was Ohio. I mean,
yeah. No, it's sad, and most people don't know, and they're still not going to get a full grasp on it, because I don't know if you can feel my frustration, but every time you talk about this, it gets on my nerves. Just so you know, like, because it's true. Like, there should be some kind of unified rules that we go by, right? And
absolutely.
And just so you know, and Ohio has a great athletic commission, so does Pennsylvania. They all do. They have their reasons for what they do. It is what it is, right? I would say the arguments that I said earlier about West Virginia, that was a time too when we have Leon Ramsey, who's our commissioner now, who comes from MMA background and actually competed in the first cage fight in MMA history. The guy knows what he's doing now, right? Before we had some boxing commissioners that were trying to do MMA, and quite frankly, they're trying to screw the sport because they didn't care about the sport. But that being said, even with Ohio and Pennsylvania still having a great athletic commission, there's still these problems, right? And I get it, like, kind of, right? I would say you're looking at an older fighter thinking he's got a shorter lifespan and his brain's probably been beat on a little bit, and it comes from a good place, most likely. It really does.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the intelligence side of me says, it does make sense. If I'm a 40-year-old fighter who's been fighting, for 30 years now, I've probably, through their eyes, more than likely, I've probably suffered some brain trauma throughout the years, constant body beating down. So, I can understand the weariness of it, but in the same token, I know what my body's been through, and if you look at my record, I've, knock on wood, I've never been knocked out ever. In the 30 years that I've been fighting, I've never been knocked out. The worst I've ever had is, body shots, and that was it.
Well, that's a great point too, and that's maybe just bringing it off the top of our head from you saying that. That's maybe one of the things they should look at. Like, all right, you could be 0-99, but have you been knocked out 99 times? If so, now we've got a problem. Or, and what kind of knockouts? Like, if you quit from body shots 99 times, okay, well, I'm not gonna say that your kidneys or liver aren't important, but that's different than brain damage, right? And yeah, and that's one of the things. Look, man, and again, I'll say a couple things. Obviously, a little bitter for all this stuff, but I just remember too, like, again, going through all that in West Virginia, and then lo and behold, when they're pulling some of my fights, they let Tommy Morrison fight, who's HIV positive. Yes. The only state in the United States that would let that guy fight. And I love Tommy Morrison. I love him. I was, man, it's amazing. Left hooks and quite frankly, he was amazing in Rocky 5 that everybody hated that movie, but I liked that movie.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that guy was amazing. They let him fight. Also, little known fight that many people don't know about while I'm going through all this stuff. Evander Holyfield fights at the Greenbrier. He fights, can't remember the guy's name, African American black gentleman that kind of went by the Sherman tank or something like that, maybe from New Jersey. But by this time, and again, Evander Holyfield, looks like he may fight again here soon. But man, he was slurring his speech, not looking good. Goes
Yeah.
in, fights in the Greenbrier, private slash. I mean, people knew about it, but it's kind of Greenbrier is not set up for big boxing events. It was kind of like in a ballroom. A bunch of people paid a bunch of money. But anyway, they called that fight because he was getting beat by this MMA guy that he's supposed to beat. Like this guy is a nobody. And he was getting beat, and they called it on a cut that really was non-existent because they needed to just stop it so that Evander didn't lose and you know, whatever. But my point is, these things happen, right? And like I'm all for protecting fighters too. I'm one of the best, or especially my gym. When it comes to sparring, like we were sparring today, I barely let people get head contact, especially in training, because I come from the era where we beat the shit out of each other, and I've learned from my mistakes. And
Yeah.
I think our generation's learning from all those things that we need to, especially in sparring, do something a little bit different than we used to. But anyway, yeah, it's a crazy world, and it is funny, and it's weird because you know, guys don't remember. But I think Randy Couture was 36 or 37 when he started fighting. Right? I can argue that MMA a lot of times it's a tough argument because some of the guys that I look at that were great when they were older were probably also on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy. Yeah, so that might, you know, cloud the stuff. But I know that Randy Couture, Dan Henderson, a lot of these guys are older when they're getting good. And my argument back in the day, outside of the TRT, was because it takes so long to learn each discipline that maybe a little bit older as you get better and we get in our prime. Where in boxing, you're learning one discipline. You kind of start, most of those guys start. I knew guys that were 10 or 11 that had 200 Golden Gloves fights by this time, which I think is nuts, but that's pretty common. And so anyway, they're a little bit different thing, but my argument again on that, if I'm looking at head trauma, if you have 200 fights by the time you're 11, there's nowhere to go but down. You know, boxers will argue the crap with me, but I'm telling you, that's not good for your brain. If you're gonna let Tom Brady take 2 weeks off because he got hit in the head on a tackle, then maybe these boxers they get punched every single day. Yeah, there's something. I mean, why are we not looking at this? Why is this not a thing? And look, we're all fighters. I'm not against it, but anyway, it's a tough argument. I'm not going to tackle this argument right now. But what I am going to say is that props to you for being 40 and taking all this head trauma and going out there and doing your thing, and going to Iowa. Where look, those guys are going to love to see the fight. Hopefully, I can make it. I know you and I haven't talked since we talked way back when, but still working on June 18th. I think is the date. Is that correct?
19th. Yeah.
19th. Yeah. Oh, that's a big day. So June 19th in Iowa. So hopefully, and what are they touting as their main event? Do they have something big planned, or what's going on there?
I forget who it is that they got fighting. There's a couple. I think the co-main and the main are pretty big fights up there.
Is it all boxing or mixed or?
Yeah, it's all
All
boxing.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Now, since you train and everything, have you now? And obviously, for people that are just getting into the sport, that maybe are watching some of these Triller events and the Jake Paul and Logan Paul brothers, and obviously now find it. If nothing else, they should find out that boxing is a sport of itself, right? Like when Ben Askren fights somebody who's the best wrestler or a better fighter, we're not having a match to see who the best fighter is. We're seeing a match to see the best boxer is. He doesn't box, right? He's and they're not fighting. So what have you done that's different? Because you are an MMA fighter, you are a grappler, even though you do everything. When you just do a boxing match, you're going to have to learn how to properly slip, bob, weave, pace for a boxing match, throw a jab, all things we don't do in MMA, and hold your hands up because people understand in MMA we got to hold our hands a little bit lower because we might get taken down. A lot of different stuff, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of what I've really been working on because, like I said, my last previous fights, I only had like 2 weeks to prepare, so I was still in that MMA mindset. I was playing a lot of high guard, a lot of open type guard, more MMA stance. And it really kind of bothered, or it affected my fighting style. So this time around, I've definitely honed in a lot more, just on my tighter boxing stances. So even like, because I teach all the classes, so even like it with the kickboxing classes and stuff that I've been doing, I've myself personally just been strictly just boxing. They've been throwing kicks and stuff and everything else. So it kind of helps. I'm slipping kicks and punches. I've been working a lot with them and basically just having everybody else come at me. So I've been working a lot more on my slipping, body movement, head movement, leg work, different things like that. So I've really tried not to throw any kicks. And of course, being a little more gentle with my jujitsu, so nothing bad happens. And that aspect. Plus I know this kid, he's young, he's going to be fast. I'm older, but I'm a little bit more wiser, and I think I have more power than him. And if anything, I don't really think he's much faster than me. So, but I'm pretty sure that's more than likely their game plan. I might be older, and I know I'm bigger than him. For once, I'm actually going to be the taller opponent, and I think he's like 5'5" or 5'6", something like that. So I might have like an inch or two on him. But yeah, it's really been a different training camp. Obviously, since I train myself, I have all my other guys and females. I just work with them a lot. We've been working a lot more on just a lot of jabs, and just honing in on that boxing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you so you haven't gotten any rounds outside of the gym, or had any partners come inside in the gym to help you out this training camp?
Nah, don't need to. I and that's the greatest thing about the people here. Everybody in my gym, they're all more than willing to help me out. And in my eyes, it don't have to be some professional, awesome person who's exactly my size, weight. How they pay people come and spar. No, I've always done it this way. I've always had just my own people help me train, and honestly, I think it works. Pretty good. Uh, Granted, there's never hardly anybody my size, but it doesn't bother me. I yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you've always been first team all body, right? So like you've always been in shape. Have you done any extra cardio stuff? Because I've been seeing some pictures of you just shredded.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. I've been doing a lot more running, even though I hate running with a passion. So in the midst of running, so since I do my classes, pretty much starting at 9 a.m. throughout the day, I've been doing a lot more cardio with every one of my classes now. So I've got like a sled with tires on it, and we'll push that up and down, be doing sprints, and like Friday night, we had MMA class. So I'll just do rounds with them. Nothing hard. It's just a continuous 1 minute on, 15 seconds off, 1 minute on, 15 seconds off. And it's just a new person every 15 seconds or every minute or whatever. And I've been doing that, with the jujitsu, trying to get my cardio up, whether it be MMA and jujitsu. So honestly, I mean, I think my cardio is pretty good. I think it's a lot better now than what it has been in a long time, really. I don't really get tired. So if they're watching, I mean,
that's a good point. Like if you've not been knocked out, so are you losing some decisions then, I assume, right? That obviously makes sense.
Yeah. So my last two fights, I wasn't really happy with. The one, my very last one, was about a year or so ago. I kind of underestimated the kid that I was going with. I had like 2 week notice fight on it or whatever. And I was still, my hands were up higher, and I was allowing him to get body shots on me. And I took a bad liver shot and I went down. And it sucked, but it is what it is. But I mean, I recovered, 5 minutes, went, had a beer, shook a guy's hand, had a good time. So yeah, it's just been, that was a body shot. The other one we're not going to talk about. It was technically a body shot, but there was a little bit of other underwriting stuff going on. Basically, the kid now, he trains under Floyd Mayweather. He's under the money team, and he's sponsored by Title. So he's a pretty good fighter. I wasn't expecting him to be that good either, but again, is what it is.
Well, the reason I'm asking, is the pace different? Something you can't handle, like in a boxing thing. Sometimes some of these guys can put a pace on, because again, like when we're training MMA or kickboxing, we're not shooting the jab as much as they do in boxing, and the game's a little bit different. The footwork's a little bit different. Is that something that you're not used to, or something that you're looking for? Let's say after those two fights, is that something you're changing or something that's different? Obviously, you don't want to get hit in the body, so you're gonna you kind of talked about that a little bit, but what's going to change, I guess, is what I'm saying. And again, you don't have to give nothing away for anybody listening, right? But what
I
do you
mean,
think?
even if they hear it, they got their own game plan. I still got mine. As far as like game planning and stuff like that, I just had a brain fart. Must have been too many hits. No,
Well, let me ask you this. Let's make it a little bit easier. Do you, and again, without giving, because you can do both. So I'm not wanting you to give anything away, but are you going to work the jab more, stay outside, or do you like to work on the inside? You do a little both, right? You can lie so that nobody knows, but is there something that's changing that's a little bit, because for people that don't know, which is a lot of people, like you can't dirty box. You can dirty box a little bit. I mean, I guess that's not right, but what James Toney does and Floyd Mayweather does, like we can't do, because there's grabbing and there's holding and there's takedowns and there's clinch work, there's knees and there's elbows, and there's certain things we can't do. And so that sometimes we're not ready for them in boxing, I would say, right? It's just not part of the
the pace is different for me, honestly, because like my MMA pace is way faster. Like I like to get in and stay moving, stay constant. A good MMA fight, there's constant movement, constant strikes. Like, boxing, you just got, 4 punches, and it's
game.
trying to regulate those 4 punches and, finding your time. It's all about that timing thing. You can't just bum rush in, clinch work, and then, go for a throw or elbows and stuff. Like, so it's kind of, I almost way it's kind of annoying, honestly, because I've had fighters where I try to, fight them, and then once I start getting a couple shots in them, they come up and they clinch, and for me, I'm like, oh, that'd be a great takedown, but unfortunately,
Yeah.
they get the clinch, we break it off. So as soon as you start getting hits on them, they come in and grab you, and then you got to break it off and you start all over again. So yeah, the pace is really hard to adapt to, I think, and that's the biggest thing, because you really got to like, I'm trying to keep that pace under control. Just the whole thrown combo, step back out of the box, come back in. So that's a little bit different, because I can throw punches all day long. And I'll do it with my people. I'm like, all right, well, let's do 5-minute rounds of boxing, or 5-minute rounds of MMA, and the cardio that you get just from one 5-minute round of MMA versus 5 rounds of boxing is so undeniably different. You can stand there and punch all day long, at least for me. Just because the pace that I like to keep on MMA versus just a boxing match. Like, I don't think I've been winded or gotten really tired during a boxing match, honestly. Just because it is, 4
Must
punches.
be amazing to not be a heavyweight. That's all I gotta say.
Well, I think too, there are different kinds of cardio too. And I've talked about Seth Jones, my striking coach. Me and him have a lot of conversations about being comfortable, right? I don't really, there are guys who are better than me at jiu-jitsu, obviously, but I'm never uncomfortable in jiu-jitsu. And because I'm not uncomfortable, it leads me to not expending excess energy. I never get to a point, even if I'm in a bad situation, I never get to a point where I'm breathing hard or I'm dying. Like I have gotten to a point now in jujitsu. It's like, okay, I've accepted this position. He's in a better position than me. I need to fight my way out of it, but I'm going to do this smartly. I'm going to use any openings that I can and timing to get out of this. And he says, for him, jujitsu, he's dying. He's like, God, he's like, as soon as I'm on bottom, I'm suffocating, and now I'm trying to fight my way out of the well. But it's the same for him in boxing. In boxing, he's like, yeah, I see everything coming. I've been here before. And if I get tagged, I know when to step out. I know when to clinch. I know when to circle. I know I know if you throw a right, that this punch is going to be loaded to come next, and I can avoid it. He's not worried about the stand-up portion of it, even if he gets into a bad situation. I'm not upset at a ground spot that is new, like a bad situation for me. And I don't think people realize just the familiarity with the position,
Right.
How far that goes in cardio. Because listen, I'm a big guy. I'm 230, and I can, even though I'm 230, I can do jujitsu all day. I can do it all day because I do fat man jujitsu. And Seth's a big guy. He's not as fat as me, but Seth's a big guy. He can do boxing all day, and he'll tell you it's not because he's in the greatest shape or he's a specimen of any kind. He's just been there. He knows what to expect.
Right. Yeah. And like you was saying, I've seen you don't get tired. It is being comfortable in those uncomfortable situations that makes you so much more relaxed, because when you're thinking about it, anytime you're thinking about something that, may seem a little bit more difficult, or you really have to strain in about it, your body has a tendency more to clench up, and you're wasting a lot more energy just thinking about it. And people don't realize, when you think about it more, your body is actually burning a lot more energy instead of just being relaxed. So yeah, I totally get it.
And the panic.
Yeah.
I think that is the thing. Is I know when I start to, I know whenever I'm striking, that panic sets in. Oh
right.
Man, he's already circled off to my left, and now punches are coming. He's behind me. I have to catch up. I need to move out and like try and get back to some sort of like throwing angle. And so whenever I'm striking, if somebody has cut the corner on me, now I'm behind. That's when I'm in trouble. And then I start to panic. And then when I panic, I start breathing hard. And when I breathe hard, I make mistakes because now I'm hyperventilating. Oh God, the world's coming in, and now I'm in quicksand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's crazy. Like, I find myself sometimes in those weird situations. I'm like, oh yeah, no, you can't clinch. Wait, stop. You're like, but it's my fault. I throw myself in the mix so much, but after a couple minutes, I'm perfectly fine. It's like waiting for that switch to happen. Sometimes you're like, oh yeah, don't do that. Like, I ain't gonna lie. 2 fights ago, I threw a Superman punch in the middle of a boxing match. Like, and the crowd was like, what the hell happened?
Yeah, but that's a good point, though. I mean, you could still throw a Superman punch in a boxing fight, but how is that received? Because I've not seen it. So tell me, how did that go? Everybody, they look at you like you're wrong with you.
Yeah. They were like, "What the hell? Are you allowed to do that? Was he allowed to do that? Like,
because you can. Yeah,
but
there's no setup. Like in MMA, you throw a leg kick and then there's no setup. So people are probably like, I don't even know what to say. I mean, you can't throw a spinning back fist in boxing. It's a different story. But
no, usually I just set up the Superman punch with like a 1-2-1-2, and then as they either back up or come forward, I just follow them up with a Superman punch. Like,
so ultimately, what happened there? I think you're okay, right?
Oh yeah. I didn't get in trouble. They were just like, wow, that was pretty unorthodox. Like, the whole crowd and even the judges and refs, they were like, I've never seen that before. I don't know if you're allowed to do it, but probably don't do that again. Like, there was no definite don't do that again. So I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm going to keep doing it. Why not? Like, I mean, you can do everything else like rope a dope, and I've seen guys, doing ducks and rolls all the way down to the guy's knees and stuff. So in my opinion, if he's allowed to duck a punch and go all the way down to like below my kneecaps to avoid a punch, why can't I leave the ground to punch him in the face?
Yeah.
Make things.
Oh man, seems okay to me. But let me ask you this question too. So, are the motivations for you still the same? Or are you a guy? I guess it would be the better question. Are you a guy that loves to compete? Is that why you're competing at 40? What's your ambitions? And for context, the reason I asked that, obviously you guys know me, and you know that I don't compete as much, and or really it's been a long time, but the reason is like, for example, our instructor Marcelo, he's like, hey, like compete for fun, like you should go out and do the masters, and I'm like, hey man, like, well, losing's not fun. And he said, well, I know, but and then and what I mean by that is, if I only have right now my training, for example, as I train probably 2 to 3 hours a week, luckily, maybe an hour on Monday, maybe an hour on Wednesday, maybe an hour on the weekend, so it's about 3 if I'm lucky. So if I competed on that 3 hours a week, which is not a lot, and I lost the how I would fix that is more training. I don't have time for that. Right? And that's what would happen in my mind. I was like, okay, I would like the competition. What's fun for me is winning. So in order to win, I need to train more. So I'm going to have to give up family time, work time, something. And to me, it's not worth those. Like I just have barely enough time to train. So I've made the choice years ago that I was like, look, it's the fun is not there for me, because the fun involves winning, and I don't have the time to correct the mistakes and go back and put in the extra time and not sit around all day and be mad that I can't train and blah blah blah, and just so I avoid the stress. And so anyway, are you one of those guys that you're like, look, man, this is what I love to do. I love to compete. This is what drives me. This is my life? Or is it something different? You also, that all being said, this is your job, right? You are at the gym all day, every day. You're in a good place other than me. You're in a place where you can compete because you are there. Um,
I
just
kind of
for
look at
comparison's sake.
it for me, I guess, in a weird concept, uh, kind of like continuing education.
No,
you
that's a
know,
good point. That's a nice comparison. I like it.
that's I mean, honestly, that's kind of how I look at it. Um,
Yeah.
plus, obviously, I'm blessed to be able to do this full time all the time, and that's all I do. For anybody who's wondering, that's what I do: 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. pretty much every day. 7 days a week. It's 12 hours a day. But I absolutely enjoy what I do. I love what I do. I wouldn't do it any other way. And so for me, I do love the competing aspect. I love the build up to it. I love everything about all of it. But also, it's still in my eyes, like even with jujitsu, I feel this urge or urgency, um, that I need to go out and still work on my technique, because I want to make sure that what I'm showing the people, because of my ideology, everything's evolving all the time. Plus, I want to show them that even though I'm 40, you can still go out there and compete, because I hear people saying, well, oh, I'm 28 and I'm gaining weight and I'm getting old. I'm like, shut the hell up. You know, if I'm 40 and I'm in the best shape of my life and I can still go out there and compete with kids that I could probably be their dad, um, there's no reason that you can't get off the couch and go and just work out, join jujitsu, join a gym, go do something. So me, there's a lot of motivation behind it. It's definitely not the money, because they don't
No,
pay
that's a
that.
good point. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely, like a continuing education, and just I freaking love it. It's crazy, but yeah.
Well, that's a good point. And you and Gary and yourself, and myself, we all run gyms, and you guys lead by example, right? And so I think that's part of it, right? You go say, hey, look, I'm this old and I run a gym, but there's no excuses. I can go out and I can do it. And win or lose, I'm showing you that if I tell you should do it, you should go ahead and do it. And there's no excuse for you not to go out and do it. And I think, and obviously it's inspirational, and it really is, right? Because in comparison, I'm living off things I did 20, 30 years ago, right? Like I did these I was Golden Gloves, I did all, whatever. But I have to say, and then I'm like, when did you win Golden Gloves? Well, 1997. Oh
Right.
shit, I wasn't even born then, right? I'm saying, like, that's
Yeah.
what I'm going off of. But realistic, honestly, I do, and I don't, I'm not trying to sit here and justify it, because what I'm saying is you're an inspiration to me as well. You're out doing those things. You get both of you guys are doing those things that are amazing. I've made a choice for whatever I do, but I love what you're able to do. And do the thing. Sorry, I'm gonna get this thing right later. My computer's going crazy. But anyway, I love what you guys are doing, and it's awesome, right? We get to see this thing, and I promise you, it motivates the guys at your gym and the girls at your gym, seeing what you do and seeing the shape that you're in. As Gary mentioned, you're in amazing shape. Gary and I both wish we had an ab. I don't know. I'm talking for Gary. You probably got a couple of abs. I have zero. Good for you. And then when Ryan takes his shirt off, gosh, he's a
I
Calvin Klein model.
I am a t-shirt at the beach kind of guy, right? Like I'm not in any shape, and I hope Dad bod is in, because that's what I got. I've got two of them. So but going back to the whole competing at 40 or whatever, for me, and we've talked about, competition can be in-house, competition can be going to a competition, but all of that for me is like, and I heard somebody say it the other day, don't let the old in, right? I'm 40, but I'm old. It is old, but I'm only as old as I let it in. If when I train with my guys, I don't train to lose. And when we're sparring, I don't spar to lose. And I know they want to come and kill me, because I'm the teacher. And if they can get a tap, then they can talk about that forever. Right. That all it takes for them is one tap on Gary, and their life is complete. But like, I can't lose any rounds at the house. So like, for me, competing in-house is to keep the old out. And then when I do go and compete, it is like Butch said, to like, I want to show that like the knowledge, the stuff that I have, just like you said, the knowledge, the stuff that I have, this works because it works, not because I'm young and explosive and full of piss and vinegar, but it works because it's tried and true.
Yep. I absolutely agree. I mean, that's kind of how I've lived it here, for however long now.
How much do you, and this is hard for you to answer, I'm sure, but how much do you think this motivates the guys in your gym? Do you think this is a catalyst for anything? Are you looking at that, or you're just looking at this fight probably, and this is something you probably reflect at afterwards? But I mean, this is a big deal. I mean,
I know the younger kids, they look up to it. They're always asking, when you fighting, where you fighting, can we watch? Is it going to be on pay-per-view? So I know it does encourage them. As far as like some of the guys, I'm sure they're probably just like, yeah, whatever, and it might be because I've constantly done it, so it's nothing new, like they're like, oh, Ryan's fighting again, so I guess, I don't know, maybe on both sides, some do and some are just like, yeah, whatever, it's going to happen again. But
so
I would like
when
to
was your first fight? Sorry to cut you off, but when is your first fight ever?
My first fight ever?
Not jiu-jitsu, not just grappling. Let's talk about, like, something where you're getting punched. What was your first
I was
combat?
10 or 11 years old.
Okay, and you're 40 now, so 23 years ago. Is that right?
20.
Fucking terrible at math.
29 years ago, if he was 11.
Yeah.
Well, that's 29 years ago. Think about that. That's craziness. Somebody could be in your gym with a child in your class, and that's when you started fighting.
Yeah.
Putting that in perspective to make you feel old. I'm just throwing it out there.
Oh, trust me, I think about it all the time. I'm like, man, this kid's like 18. I could be his dad and this and that. Like, man.
It is odd. That part is weird and obviously all three of us know, but it's like I never think about the people that I hang out with. I don't care if they're 16. To me, everybody's the same age, right? It's
Absolutely.
only when we talk about stuff like this that I remember. And it's mostly when I'm saying stuff like this because they'll say, "Hey, when did you start stuff?" And I'm like, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, "Yeah, I was like not even thought of it." And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
shit." But otherwise, I feel like we're all, I don't know what they look at when they see me. And it was a good point. Like, I remember seeing this a little quote one time, or maybe as a little story, but a guy that was 80, and they're asking him what was the difference of all the years of all the things he's seen and all the things he's went through. And he said, that nothing is different. What's different is how people see me, because I still see myself as the same person I was when I was 18. And that's how I see me. I don't think I've changed, right? I'm still the same immature guy that I was. I'm obviously have more wisdom, and I have things to offer people that also that they don't listen to, as I didn't listen to when I was 18. So the wisdom is basically worthless, right? But I feel like I'm the same immature, goofy guy, and that's why I can hang out with 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds, because we have the same stupid humor, the Beavis and Butthead things that we know that the other 18-year-olds have no idea what Beavis and Butthead are, right? Like we're like, that's this, we make fun of it, but it is so wild thinking of all those things. And here we are, right? It's basically what I'll say. It's like, here we are, just living our life and hanging out with the same people. But in going with what you said, Gary, or too, like I think earlier, like you said, don't let the old in. I'm almost like, you're as old as the people you hang out with. And as long as I'm hanging out with kids, I'm a kid, which my wife probably hates that I'm still acting immature. But that's how I am, right? And I think that's how we are at the gym. We get to be goofy guys. We get to play around and say stupid stuff and jokes that nobody else would get, that we all get. That again, like Beavis and Butt said, Butthead stuff. Like she said whatever, that like stupid stuff like that, and it's funny. Um, but then again, here we are at the same age, trying to think that we're the same age as we were, and this is the only time that we find out that maybe we're not. And I'm not saying that because you're getting ready to fight, because that's not the kind of motivation that you want, right? Believe me, that's the wrong thing I could say. But what I'm saying, at the same time, though, the way that you fight now with having wisdom is not the same way that you'd fight when you're 18. When I was 18, I'd stand in
Oh,
front of you and go toe to toe, and I would say you're gonna have to fucking kill me, because I'm gonna kill you first, right? Now I'm like, yeah, you might kill me, so maybe back up a little bit and pick my
yeah,
shots.
absolutely. Like I'm not the same fighter I was, when I was 18, 19. Like, now I'm way more cautious, but in the same token, I know what I can do. And I know my body. So yeah, I mean it's way easier, I think, now to fight than it was back then, because like you said, we were young and dumb and we'll just take a couple hits and just keep going. But now, we're way more intelligent as far as like our fight science. And we know to, parry and move and block and, slip everything else, you know.
Unfortunately, in the 90s, I barely knew that stuff. As my trainer, which is Leon Ramsey, as we mentioned earlier, the commissioner of West Virginia, but he always said, he's like, you fight checkers instead of chess. And I was like, what's that mean? He said, like, you take a hit to give a hit. That's checkers. You need to have a better game plan, right? Unfortunately, I'm now 44. I probably have the same game plan. The only difference is I do a lot less of it, right? I'm a little smarter. Doesn't mean I'm a little bit better. But that all being said, what I want to say too, though, Ryan, though, is your inspiration to your gym. I think, I mean, you're one of only two gyms that I know of in the Vienna Parkersburg area, right? I know of the Pedro Sauer gym, and those guys are great gym, but they do something a little different than you're doing. You're out there competing in MMA and boxing, kickboxing. They're a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu gym, and again, that's where I came from. Those used to be guys that were tied to me, so I'm definitely not saying anything bad. Those guys are awesome. But there's a difference between and not just because it came in my head, but Mike Shepard's gym, the Doghouse Fight Club too, also the guy that I train with. But and you're doing it. You're doing it. You're a guy that competed 20 years ago, and here you are. You're still doing it. Right? Like, it's an inspiration to everybody. It's an inspiration to myself. Not speak for Gary, but I'm sure for him. And and you guys, it's also, so people don't know too, you have some wonderful ladies in the gym that I was happen to meet. I remember Angie specifically, her name. I don't remember everybody else's name, but those girls are awesome. And Stephanie, I don't know if she still trains there, the girl that Stephanie Grady that had a baby and stuff, but
Right.
um yeah, man, you guys, like, to them, this must be there's nothing like having a coach who you admire go out and put it all on the line and show, to put it out there and show what you've got, and that what you're telling them is the real deal. And then here I am, and I'm here to do it, and they get to support you. um Man, it's a crazy feeling, and I don't know if anybody's going to be able to go to your fight, meaning those guys, but I'm sure they want to, and I'm sure they want to support you. I was like in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of tough. There's only corn out there.
Yeah,
um
yeah. It sucks that it's like 12 hours away. Um,
yeah.
I could have taken a fight down in Tampa, Florida, uh,
Yeah.
but I already signed the contract for this one, which is unfortunate because it was a chance at an MMA down in
Oh, really?
Tampa, Florida. Yeah, yeah. And it was like I think maybe a week after I signed the contract for this fight, so
Well,
kind of
so
sucks.
that leaves me good to fight. I'm assuming you handle all your fights at this point. Is that correct? Are you basically your manager and everything?
Yeah, yeah. I've never had a manager or anything, which is kind of funny because like I'll see, posts for like, hey, we need a fighter for such and such and such. And I'm like, hey, I'll put my 2 cents in. And they're like, no, 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 we don't talk to fighters directly. We talk to managers and promoters. I was like, okay, well, I don't have a promoter or manager or anybody else. I am me. I do it all. I was like, so
Yeah.
they're like, oh, well, that's just weird. You need a manager. I was like, no, I don't. I can manage myself.
How receptive to that are they after you say that?
I've had some interesting conversations with them before. I've been cussed at and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, that's bullshit," blah blah blah. And then some of them they're like, "Oh yeah, I respect that." And then of course it's, "Oh well, would you need a manager? Would you need someone to?" And
Well, first of all, let me say this too. Like, props to those guys for bringing that up. And let me give my 2 cents of why. As a fight promoter, manager, I've been everything in the time. Some are probably looking for the 10 to 15 to 20% cut, unfortunately, right? Which is, it is what it is. So you can say it's bullshit. You can say it's not. Some of them do, they do their work and it's worth it. The other thing, as a fighter, I know as a manager, my fighters would do kind of what you're doing, and they would go, like, they'd see a post on the internet, somebody looking for fights, they'd write the guy, they'd say, I'll take the fight. The next thing I know, my fighter writes me and says, hey, I've got a fight June 5th, will you be there? And I would get pissed. I'd say, fuck no, I'm not going to be there. And then we'd go up, and then, but the reason why, and it's just so people know why that is, and it's not for malicious reasons. And what I would say is, as a fighter, Ryan, this is you're the fighter. A fighter will fight, a real fighter, which you are, and which Gary is, you will fight anybody. So you need somebody to protect you. That's what I would say, like, and that was what I would tell them. I say, don't take those fights. Here's my job. My job is, and this is what they do in boxing. MMA is a little different, right? And this is why people see in boxing, you guys see guys that are 30-0 versus 30-0. That means they most likely fought 30 bums, or at least 20 to 25 bums, and then 5 guys that push them a little bit, right?
yeah.
In MMA, unfortunately, most guys fight everybody. So that's why you see guys that are like 10-10, but these guys are awesome. And you see guys now that have, like Charles Oliveira, that has the belt, but he was like 10-11. And then all of a sudden he went on a 9-fight win streak, right? And now he's the champion. And there's more in the 205 champion in the UFC, and on and on and on, right? Because these guys have to fight everybody. So they don't have the luxury. But my point was, hey, look, you're the fighter. What I want you to do is fight. You will fight everybody. My job is to find you the best matchups for your skill at the time. So, uh, and another thing, like, let's say in the early or late 90s, early 2000s, you could get to the UFC if you're 5-0. You really could. Little people don't know this, but if you're an amateur at 5-0, you can make the UFC. For example, John Jones, the best maybe ever, was like 3-0 when he was in the UFC. I know you're right. You guys might correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right. No, now obviously he was with Greg Jackson. He had a pool, but that's the thing. If you knew somebody could get in, I knew people. I could get you in there, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, look, I need you to be 5-0. It doesn't matter who the five guys are because ultimately they're going to look at your record. You're 5-0. You could have fought five bums. As long as I get you to 5-0, we've got a shot. So I don't
That
need you taking, especially as an amateur. I don't need you taking tough fights for no pay. Let's go, right? Um, so there's more involved into it as a manager than there is a fighter. And I get it. And that's the thing I was telling you. I was like, I'm not trying to discourage you or say that you're wrong. I want you to be who you are. I want you to say, I'll fight anybody, anytime, anywhere.
Mhm.
That's what a fighter's supposed to do. And that's why you need a manager to protect you and take you to those things.
Now, I ain't gonna
A
lie,
little
like
different.
the so you mentioned those girls' names, right? So typically, I do usually bounce off of them. I'm like, okay, so I have a fight coming up, guys, and like, and I don't necessarily say, "What do you think?" But I
Yeah.
do look at the feedback from them, because they see more than what I know that they see sometimes. Like as far as my mental state, my physical being, because sometimes they're like, well, you look like you're probably not in the best of shape right now, or, uh, you know, and it's just them being, nice or looking out for me, because they do care. So because, if I ask a guy, he'll be like, well, I don't know, dude, maybe, maybe not. What do you think? But typically the
A
women
little different.
are usually the ones that are like, Ryan, I don't think that's a good idea, you know? So they're
Yeah.
pretty good sounding boards for me. So I guess technically they would all be my managers. There's probably like two or three of them that, I really do trust their opinions and stuff. Um, and I just kind of bounce off of them. And, there's one guy, James, that I spar with continuously all the time. So, I'll even bounce it off him. I'm like, hey, here's this guy. What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, yeah, sure. Why not? What do you think? Yeah, okay. And we'll just kind of go from there. So, yeah, I guess you could say I kind of have a management team. Um, it's crazy, but that's just
You
how it's
still,
worked.
and that's okay. You still have the bottom line. And listen, there's a lot of athletes like that. All that what I said is what it's my viewpoint. But like Mark McGuire, one of the best baseball players of all time, I think was his own manager, right? And
Yeah.
his point was, who's going to negotiate my contract and my stuff better than me? Because I know, right? And that's probably how you view it, right? And that's fine. That's what I'm. But for people that don't know there, and I think people should know why there's a different viewpoint, right? It's not
Right.
and also so people know I never took 10% or 15 or 20% from I took zero because also so people know most of the time we're talking about 200 and 200. We're talking about $400 if you win. I ain't taking none of your money. Unfortunately, like you're not making any,
Yeah.
like so my viewpoint was always like, look, if you make the UFC and we're talking about 20s, 30s, 40,000, 100,000, then we'll deal with it at that point. But look, at this point in my life, I also know that if you got to the UFC, because this also happened to some of my fighters, it got to a point where they didn't have enough good sparring partners to go with, right? Once they got to a certain level, so I had to send them away anyway. And so like all my investment, quote unquote investment, meaning that I said, hey, keep your 10% or 15%, keep it. We'll deal with it later. As a good friend, which I always was, I said, look, here's the deal, man. I think you've outgrown the gym. I think you need to move on. And because you're going to move on with your management and all those people too. And they did. I had guys go with Pat Miletich, and I had guys go with Rich Franklin, and guys that were in the UFC already. And I was like, look, those guys are there already. So if I'm going to have to go to them to beg to get you into the place, you might as well be with them anyway, right? And so um, it is what it is. I took this. You're my friend, and that's what I took. I'm not at this to try to make money. And you know, if it would have worked out in a certain way, it would have worked out, but it didn't. And I'm not bitter about that, right? But anyway, that was the thing. Also, like I said, I brought that up just to say this is a tough game, and people don't understand what it is to be a fighter, what it is to be a manager, what it is to be a coach. There's a lot of stuff involved. So props to you. On top of doing all that stuff, also taking the fights and doing what's best for you, according to you, right? And then having to manage your gym on top of everything because I also know, and Gary and I have talked about this on other podcasts. Another reason, personally, why I said I don't compete as much as I would. One of the winning losing thing we talked about. The other thing was, at some point for me, my personality is, if I'm getting ready for a fight, it's about me now. So the next 3 months I'm going to train are all about me, which
Right.
means that's not fair for the guys paying 65 or 85 a month, because your money's useless to me right now. I'm worried about me, and that's not fair. Like I shouldn't ask for your money if I'm not going to pay any attention to you whatsoever.
And
So I had to make those decisions, right?
for me, honestly, like their workout sessions are 10 times better. Like, because like I was saying, I jump in with them and I'm like, all right, guys, let's get it. And I'll put them through the ringer. I'm having them do the same stuff that I do, and I'll work out with them. I don't care if I do it 2 or 3 times a day. Um, I want them to have that experience of what kind of a workout that I go through. And for me, it's motivating to see them get pushed. And when I see them pushing harder, it motivates me even more to push harder. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. As far as like putting them on the back burner, because I've done that before, and I felt bad. I came back, I was like, guys, I should probably, slow down on my fights and stuff because I'm not paying as much attention to you like I should. But I think I've gotten to the point now to where I've hit a pretty good happy medium as far as like how I train with them. Because I'm still getting good training out of it. Like if we're, when they're hitting mitts and stuff, I find that I can do it in certain ways to where I'm still benefiting really well from it. The other thing, obviously that is the hardest for them to benefit from me is the jujitsu. Because obviously you can't do that in boxing. So, but instead of going hard, I just, well, not instead of cranking on different things like that, I just try to use speed and cardio and different things to really push them on their jujitsu aspect. Because I have some pretty good solid guys, and they're willing to push the envelope as well. So luckily, it doesn't, I don't think, affect them as much. I know it does a little bit, but they also know too, that, and they'll even say, they're like, hey man, you got a boxing match coming up, blah, blah, don't go as hard, I don't want to be responsible for like blowing your knee out or something, so yeah.
It's a good point, because you got to avoid injuries. That's not another thing people don't think about, right? That's why you wear headgear at certain points. It's not because headgear stops you getting knocked out, but it might stop you from getting headbutted or cutting an eye or
Yeah.
little things like that, right? Yeah, Gary, you take over. I've been talking too long, so.
No, and that is a big part of it too. Like you got to think about your own safety coming up to a fight, or well, especially in boxing, right? You don't want to take a unintentional headbutt or an unintentional elbow in the middle of jiu-jitsu practice, right? Or a knee to the head. It was a couple weeks ago. It was just jiu-jitsu training. The same day, I took an elbow and a knee to the same eyebrow, and I was like, nope, no blood, but it was a clean shot to the brow, and it was something that could have easily cut me open, and it didn't happen, thankfully. And I don't have a fight coming up, and we weren't even rolling that hard. It was just like fast-paced movement caused it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, my worst injuries have been in training with jiu-jitsu. Like you was talking about the slip of the knee. Like I remember I was getting ready for a championship MMA fight, and we were just rolling, nothing hard, and we were just super slick, and his knee slid up, broke my orbital bone, done. Like stupid stuff like that. It's crazy, but yeah, it happens all the time in training. Like,
yeah, and it's one of those.
Well,
I was gonna say it's one of those things where freak accidents happen all the time, right? Especially if you're training every day like we are, and the same guys are going there, and you're trying to make your guys get better, and you have to push them a little more, which means you have, and as your guys grow, you have to push the pace a little more to make them grow, because if you don't put the pressure on them, they can't feel what the real resistance is. So we're all trying to make those guys better as well. And in the process, those things happen. Knees and elbows. I mean, we're talking. I, I always talk about how I like to pass with my face. So I like pressure passing system. My face is buried on their chest, and a lot of times I'll slide up, and they're trying to frame off of my face, trying to peel my face off of their chest. And a lot of times that turns into an elbow into my eye, or an elbow into my eyebrow. It happens because I've got to turn the heat up on them a little bit.
Let me ask you guys. So have you guys been hurt worse in jiu-jitsu compared to MMA/kickboxing or whatever? Have it been more so in jiu-jitsu, I guess, than boxing or kickboxing? I guess is a better question, because MMA, it's too vague, right? It involves everything.
I'll go first. I'll go first because you've got more experience in striking. As far as striking goes, the worst thing that's ever happened to me is I've taken body shots that made me want to quit everything I've ever done in my life. And me and Seth had talked about it. There was a body shot that he hit me with one time, and I didn't go down, but I knew that I didn't want to get hit in the body anymore. So my hands went from here to here, and I was just like, punch me in the face. I'll keep my chin down. You can hit me in the head as much as you want. But it wasn't an injury. Definitely all injuries that I've had, as far as like whether I've been cut or whether I've been something got hurt, it's been from jiu-jitsu. Probably the worst cut that I ever had. A newer guy had come into the gym that I was training at, and I had him in guard, and he just lurched forward in my guard and headbutted me. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? Split my eyebrow open, and now I'm leaking all over the place. And I was like, what was that about, man? He was in my guard and jumped forward with his forehead. Okay, well, now I'm split open. And then probably the worst injury I had was another newbie came in, and we were going over Americanas, and they went to my side, had the Americana locked up, and then wrenched on it as hard as they could. And I was like, dude, I'm not offering any resistance. And that was the time that I had to take 3 months off. Now, as far as striking goes, I've been stung a couple up top, and I've seen the white lights and then everything come back to normal, but never any like real bad injuries, and just a few body shots. So everything that has been bad that's happened to me has been jiu-jitsu, not in striking.
Yeah. Honestly, like, I have to agree, man. Like I said, I've been fighting, for 30 years now. And my worst injuries have been from jiu-jitsu. I broke my orbital bone. Dude slid and hit me with his knee. I've had my arm popped out of socket. Stupid shit. And I don't count CJJ when I fought Brandon Moreno. That's still jiu-jitsu. I don't care what anybody says. That was probably the worst as far as like striking wise goes. So it was striking / jiu-jitsu, but he didn't know jiu-jitsu, so we're going to consider that, I guess, striking. Worst I got from that was some vertigo, where he knocked a couple screws loose on me. Other than that, like any boxing, kickboxing, or MMA match, I've, knock on wood, I've never been hurt. I've never been put on my ass. I've never had anything. The worst I've ever had was like a body shot to the liver, and 5-minute recovery from it. That's about it. Like,
one of the reason I asked too, and that's kind of what I was thinking you'd say, and it's the same for me, right? Like, I had stitches this year and a couple other things, and I think my torn bicep was from boxing, but the other stuff is from jiu-jitsu. But I think it's and it's kind of tough to say. One is because you can run into somebody that's new, that's a little wild, right? Just like Gary said, somebody that's new and they just lurched forward because they don't know what to do, and all of a sudden you took a headbutt to the face that you weren't expecting. A lot of times, if we know that there's a propensity for damage, for example, if I'm in reverse Keisugatami or some kind of weird position, I know people might throw up their knee. If I catch a knee, I'm kind of prepared for it, right? Like, it still hurts, but I'm like, what? I'm keeping my head up, so I might get kneed, and I get kneed, and it's a little bit different, where as opposed to me catching a random elbow or a knee from a random thing, it's interesting. And I also know, and I still spar, but especially when we're sparring hard, back in the day, we Vaselined our gloves and we Vaselined our faces, and that way things kind of slipped off, and it was is really to stop the soft tissue damage for the upcoming fight, right? That was the point. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot lazier with that. We used to do a really good job of before we got in the ring, we took Vaseline, rubbed it on the front of our gloves and then most of our face. Our trainer did it or we did it. It may have helped some, it may have helped none, but it definitely seemed like it helped,
Yeah.
right? In jiu-jitsu, you don't do that. And so I also think that jiu-jitsu, we kind of forget it. And the reason I also bring it up is because the other boxing, kickboxing are looked at as far more dangerous, and they probably are, because arguably you're taking brain damage. So that's the thing. I'm actually, when I say that, I'm actually looking, really my answer is, it's kind of weird because I'm looking for an answer where you're saying, well, I got my eye split open, which is soft tissue damage. And that's actually not that bad, because if I really look into that same question, we can't quantify the kind of brain damage you took when you just said I got some screws loosed and I had some vertigo. That's pretty fucking serious. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like I can't quantify that either. I've had the same thing where I remember a guy that's 175 hit, like the bell rang, I put my hands down and he hit me so hard it was like a Looney Tunes cartoon. It felt like I was the uh, little thing you hit a sledgehammer and the bell goes off. That's what I felt like. But it was the opposite. I felt like he hit me in the head and it went down to my toes and then exploded. You know what I mean? It was like, it's a different kind of thing, right? But it is also why people look at MMA so damaging, or as your casual fan looks at MMA as so dangerous, where we don't consider it as dangerous as boxing, really. And it's because of the soft tissue damage. If I watch an MMA fight and I know nothing and both guys are bleeding, I'm like, God, that's so barbaric. That's human cockfighting. That's what they say, right? But I see why they say it, because they look at it and there's blood everywhere, as opposed to a 12-round boxing fight where these guys just hit each other in the head for 1,000 times a piece.
Absolutely.
And they may never be the same people after this fight, but there's no blood.
And
so you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a different thing,
Yeah, that's where people don't understand, the kinesiology of the body. Like when you're into that 8th, 9th, and 10th round, you're dehydrated. People, a lot of people don't realize when you're dehydrated, your brain's going to swell and there's less fluid in your brain to move around.
Absolutely.
And you're
Yes.
taking
Very good
nothing but
point.
headshots, versus, MMA, yeah, you're going to be dehydrated. But if you're feeling, tired, you can clench up, you can do jujitsu, there's a lot more things that's going on than just a bombardment of, hundreds and hundreds of punches every round. And that's why, you'll see people, stroke out at the end of a boxing match. You got a 10, 12 round fight. That's exactly why, they may not look bloody, but their brain is swollen, hugely. Versus MMA, you may have someone like Nate Diaz or, Tony Ferguson, who just bleeds when you look at them. But in all essence, they're still technically kind of fine. They've got a couple of bruises, but yeah, just the soft tissue on the outside is mostly the damage. But
and the MMA gloves cut people worse than we've got a part that's Velcroed, which the Velcro is typically covered up by tape, but that also cuts people. Even the short fingers, that part, the stitched part, cuts people. The fact of the elbows and the knees cut people. There's a lot of things that we're getting cut for, which again it looks bad. It doesn't cause a lot of damage, really. Like you and I or Gary, all three of us could be bleeding and not even know, right? We know because we wiped or we feel like we're sweating, we wipe our brow, and you're like, oh man, we're bleeding, but we don't actually, like, I never even felt that. I More often than not, I catch hell from my wife, just so you guys know, and it's kind of funny. I come home and she's like, who gave you that hickey or whatever it is, right? Because I've got maybe somebody gi choked me and I've got these marks on my face, and somebody cross-faced me. I've got these, soft tissue bruises. I don't even know. I have no clue that this happened. I roll, I have a good time. I change my clothes. I go home, walk in the door. My wife's like, what the fuck happened to you? And then I'm like, I don't know. And I look in the mirror, I'm like, dear God, like what did happen to me? Right. As opposed to maybe boxing or kickboxing or even MMA for that matter, where I actually feel the damage and it doesn't do what the normal person sees, which they're freaking out about, right? And it's a little bit different, right? It's a different kind of thing. Anyway, it's neither here nor there, but it is an interesting fact of what we all go through and what's perceived damage versus what is real damage. Um, and again, also, if I'm going to tie it all together, as what happens when you're 40, like if you're 40 and you're bleeding like that, it's a big freaking deal for somebody, not for you. It's for somebody. That's a big freaking deal, right? Gary,
Yeah.
it looks like you had something to say. Go ahead, Gary.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and that's kind of the difference between jujitsu versus boxing, right? It's like uh, usually the evidence shows up that you've been hit or cut or whatever pretty quick. And in a boxing match, if we say it's a 10-round match and you've got 3-minute rounds, it's 30 minutes. You know, go run. If we're saying it's a 6-minute mile, right? If you're running a pretty fast pace, it's a 6-minute mile while people are punching you. And now, like the entire time you ran those 5 miles that it takes to do a boxing match, if we're trying to equate it into something, you know, that other people outside of boxing or jiu-jitsu can understand, you know, in the middle of that 5-mile run, you're getting punched the whole time. At the end of the 5-mile run, you're getting punched, and so that's kind of goes back to what you're saying is like, I know when I run 5 miles, after I'm done, I am done. And I didn't get punched the whole time. And so you're doing the same thing, but you're absorbing all of the punches and stuff in the meantime. And you don't see it physically, you know, unless a nose gets broke or, you know, Canelo fought, oh man, I lost his name, Billy Joe Saunders, and broke his orbital socket. And you can see that, but most of the time you don't see it. That, you know, the people who have died afterwards, the guy that passed away after the fight was called and they took him out, like, you don't see it physically. Yeah, he's a little red in the face and he obviously looks tired, but you don't see the what they have actually absorbed. Where in jiu-jitsu, those stray elbows, those stray knees, it's immediate. We go home, like Butch was saying, we go home. All the time I've got like little marks on the inside of my arm where people are grabbing a hold of my gi and they grab a little bit of skin and they pinch, and it doesn't feel great at the time, but it's nothing that is like that bad, but it leaves a mark, you know. And I'll catch an elbow or something like that and it leaves a mark, but it's nothing that, for me, like Butch said, I'll come home and I've got bruises and everything, and yeah, it's just a bruise, but it's not brain trauma.
Right.
Well, and it's tough, right? For the uneducated person, it looks, again, right? It looks bad. And like I said, when I was giving these same speeches trying to make MMA legal, you know, to the House of Delegates and the Senate and all those people, that's what they looked at and trying to convince them that this wasn't a dangerous sport. It did not matter, right? Like when I'm like, yeah, it's just soft tissue damage. They're like, what does that mean? Right? Like we get what that means, but they're like, I don't know what you're saying. I watch boxing all the time and they don't look like this. And I'm like, yeah, I know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And I explain it and they're like, yeah, whatever. Let's just move on because you're clearly lying to me right now, you know? But the point is, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've got a guy right now who's been nursing a knee injury, and I told him, I was like, you know, go ahead and go to the doctor and talk to him about it. But as far as like when you're telling him like, hey, I got this from jiu-jitsu, don't say anything about jiu-jitsu. Just tell him what kind of exercise that you do outside of jiu-jitsu that makes it hurt, because they don't understand. People who don't do jiu-jitsu don't understand like what the problem is. So if it hurts when you run in your knee and or if you're shuffling sideways, say, hey, when I'm doing a sideways shuffle, I feel pain on the outside of my knee. But don't say, hey, I feel pain when I do jiu-jitsu, because then the doctor's going to say, hey, don't do jiu-jitsu anymore. No, it's not. Every time. And they'll just say, oh, you got to stay out of this. You can't be doing this anymore. And I tell them, like, don't talk. Hey, if when I play basketball, if I take a jump shot, it hurts in my calf. Tell him that. Don't tell him when I'm in guard and I'm sitting in guard and I'm up on my toes that it hurts in my calf, because he's going to just say, don't do jiu-jitsu anymore. He doesn't understand unless it's a doctor who does jiu-jitsu, and then make sure you pay him well, because you need to keep him.
Yep. Well, and to that point, you know who else will tell you that is your wife. Don't tell her that you hurt after jiu-jitsu, because she'll say, just quit that shit.
Yeah.
You don't want to hear that either.
She doesn't need to know anything.
Yeah, it's perfect. No, it's one of the few things that I highly suggest keeping that from your wife, because every time I come home and I say, man, my leg's killing me. And then she's like, you know what? I am tired of you complaining about, why don't you just quit jujitsu? And that's not what I want to hear either. So it's the best thing is just keep your mouth shut, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Well, hey, I think we got a little off track, right? But not really. It's the same thing. But what I do want to say, when I want to get back on track real quick, is Ryan. Let's get back to you real quick. Again, when is your fight? How can we watch it? And let's just get on to that real quick. Let's hype you up, and then we'll talk about the seminar and the tournament and all that stuff. But it's June 19th, clearly Davenport, Iowa. How can everybody watch this fight? How can they see you? What can they do to support you? Take it away, Ryan.
Yeah, it's June 19th, Davenport, Iowa. As far as the pay-per-view, I haven't received any information as far as like what link or what that's going to be through, because I've had a lot of people ask about that. I'm hoping I get some information soon. As soon as I get info on the link, I assume it'll be a pay-per-view link. I'm going to just attach it probably on the gym page or whatever, and let everybody know that way they can see it and everything. Yeah, that's pretty much all I know
That's a
about
big deal.
it.
Well, when are you going to quit sparring? When's the last day you're going to spar?
I already quit sparring. I did some light stuff on Friday, but it was just some MMA sparring, but it was all just technical, no hard hit, no nothing at all. So there was no hard hits or anything. I probably haven't sparred hard in probably, I don't know, a week and a half or two. So I want to make sure that.
Yeah, no, and the reason I asked it, I didn't know if somebody could still help you in that manner, and obviously they can't. But is there another way they can people help you financially? This stuff costs money. I'm sure the organization probably helping fly you down and take care of some stuff. But on top of that, there's a lot of expenses that go with this, and
Yeah,
we don't need to talk about what you're getting paid. But look, I know from experience, it's probably not a ton.
no, it's really
Can
not.
anybody support you in any way and help you out, or is there anything anybody can do for this?
Yeah, honestly, anything would help. Just as far as like some travel expenses that are on my end, and a little bit of training costs and stuff for myself. Um, yeah, I mean, I got PayPal, and if they
Yeah.
want to, do anything towards my PayPal, it's just it's all lowercase. It's SHOTO 1980 at yahoo.com. And that's
Right.
my link.
Say,
And for
say,
people that don't,
say
go
that
ahead.
one more time
Go ahead.
for us, Ryan, so I can write this down. I'll put it in the link.
Okay.
SHOTO
1980.
1980.
Yeah, at Yahoo.
And for people that don't know, Ronin MMA, which is Ryan's gym, Run Jiu-Jitsu and MMA, he has a ton of awesome t-shirts, tank tops, rash guards, tumblers. A lot of times they raffle off cool stuff. Ryan's actually really good at with his hands. He's an artist. He's done some cool stuff, some cool chairs, multiple things. But the reason I bring that up is if you're wanting something for your money on top of that, right, as far as supporting you too, those are things that you could buy as well and get a badass t-shirt. Like one of my favorite t-shirts that I wear all the time to train with, and Gary pointed this out, is Ryan's MMA shirt, which I also wear Gary's Bobcat MMA shirt too. But there's a bunch of pictures of me floating around wearing that one for whatever reason. So yeah, so support them that way too. Where can they get those t-shirts from you?
So I have a link on the website, on our Facebook page, and it goes directly to the shop link on Teesprings. So basically, you just go to our Facebook page, and you'll see the drop down icon or whatever. You can go to the shop, and there's plenty of garb on there as far as like tank tops, shirts, sweatpants, sweatshirts, a lot of different things like that.
What One other quick thing too, because there is another gym in Ohio named Ronin MMA. Am I correct? How do they
Right.
keep
So
you guys?
it's just
separate?
Ronin. It's Ronin is up in Columbus, and Vitor Oliveira is
Oliveria?
the
Right.
Yeah. So he's the head guy over there. But I think it's just Ronin. It's not Ronin MMA. It's just Ronin.
Yeah, it's just Ronin. I think their logo is like just a black circular type deal, whereas ours is completely opposite. It's got the
Well, it's important because I just make sure when you're looking up, you get the right one, right? Luckily there's not two of me, but there is of Ronin, and Ronin is popular, right? Like, and it is actually, just so you know too, whenever I posted, hey, it's like Ronin's coming on, as everybody's like, man, that's a cool name. I wish I had it. So everybody loves that name because it's a traveling warrior, correct? I think, right? You guys probably, yes, exactly. And so everybody loves that because I have a lot of friends that are military, and that's essentially what they are. They're Ronin warriors. They're traveling around training with whoever they can get to train with and fighting whoever they can get to fight with. And that's essentially what you are, right? You're out there, you're doing your thing, and you're getting it in when you can. So make sure you guys get the right one. That's super important. And I'm glad I remembered to bring it up with all my brain trauma. Because it's important, because those other guys are badasses too, just so you know. They are badass too. But today we're talking about just this badass. Support this badass, not the other badasses. This one. We got to get him. He's got a fight coming up. Ryan busts his ass day and night. He's at the gym way more than Gary and I probably are. And I'm going out on a limb. I don't want me to speak for you, Gary, but I know you're there more than I am. And you do a lot for the community. Those kids love you. The women love you. I'm sure the guys love you too, but I know those two love you. So yeah. So let's do that. And Gary, go ahead.
Again, Ryan, thanks for coming. Guys, don't forget, we do have, not to take away from Ryan, he's got his fight coming up in 2 weeks from now. But we also have the Dean Lister seminar coming up on the 6th at 12 o'clock at Butch's. So make sure that you reserve your spot for that. It's going to be $75 to do the seminar. We also have the submission only that's going to take place in Nelsonville and Butch. Is there still a deal going on for that?
There is. So I'm still, even though the last couple of times, the last time we had Dean Lister scheduled before, and he got in a car wreck and his spleen exploded, which is crazy. But he's literally fought through that in a matter of no time, and he's back. But because of that, I'm offering just $100 to do the seminar and the tournament, which is a crazy deal, meaning that you're basically getting the seminar for $25, pretty much, or less. And just so you guys know, like we talked about this at our gym the other day. Let me bring this up real quick. Look, John Danaher he's getting credit for saying, why ignore 50% of the body? But that's a Dean Lister statement. So if you listen to a lot of the recent podcasts, John Danaher went ahead and corrected that for everybody and said, hey, I heard that from Dean Lister first. And Dean Lister is really, I'd say, the American that's most popular for revolutionizing leg locks and bringing them about. Now, John Danaher really made the system what it is, meaning he made ashigarami inside and outside and leg entanglements. That's what ashi means, really, is the leg entanglements, what they are. But Dean Lister is the one that brought that up. Dean Lister is also the one that brought up 50-50. He's been doing 50-50 before it's called 50-50, before really Ryan Hall and Lloyd Irvin made that popular. He's got a leg lock called the corkscrew, and I can go on and on. And you know what? There's a bunch of people in my gym that are solely at my gym because they love Jocko Willink and his podcast. Dean Lister is Jocko's trainer. So listen, man, this is one of the guys, especially because he's American, that's made jiu-jitsu what it is in the United States. And we have the opportunity to train with the guy and a deal. And on top of that, go to a great tournament in the local area and support everybody, support the local gyms and do all that stuff. But you got all this coming up in June. And Liz, like, literally, I don't know when this thing's going to be out, like hopefully the next couple of days, but let's say in the next couple of days, you only have a freaking couple of days to get to this damn seminar. Most importantly, because he's going to be here Sunday, which is June 6th. Again, I don't know when this is going to be out, but it's June 6th. By the time this comes out, it's going to be less than a week. You need to get there. You need to get there. He's not coming very often. He's flying in from San Diego. He's a legend. We are lucky. Limited a space available. Get your ass there.
Yeah, I'm crazy excited about that. crazy excited about the turnout at your fight. I can't wait to find a pay-per-view link and support Ryan and his endeavor of going to Iowa and going boxing. The 26th, we have the submission only in Nelsonville, so we're excited about that as well. And man, as always, I'm sorry.
This may let me also bring this up. This very well may be the only time this is ever in Nelsonville, Ohio, and the reason is Gary is one of the big instrumental people in bringing this to Nelsonville, Ohio, because he runs Bobcat MMA, but he's moving. So if we take Gary out of the equation, this may never happen again. Look, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen again, but it may not. There's a very good chance. So if you're in Nelsonville, Ohio, anywhere near, this is your opportunity to compete.
Anywhere in the Athens area, I'm hoping that we get a big turnout and that we can show that Southeastern Ohio can support a competition, a tournament. Promoters will be interested because not unlike Butch with MMA in West Virginia and not being able to get fights to be held in West Virginia, it's kind of the same thing in Southeast Ohio. Everybody overlooks us. We're still in the foothills of the Appalachians, and all the things that happen in Ohio happen Columbus or north and west. They Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus. For us to do anything, we have to travel an hour and a half. And I would like to see that, if we get a pocket of big interest in jiu-jitsu, if we can make that happen, then we could have Grappling Industries, or we can have Fuji's, or we can have, I've always said it's about the community. But, we can be from different teams and whatnot, but if the community comes together to support jiu-jitsu, rising tide raises all ships, and I'm hoping that that's what happens. So I want to see as much jiu-jitsu interest in Southeast Ohio as possible. So get out there, Nelsonville, 26th of June. And man, I'm so blessed. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Butch, again for another good podcast, guys. I have all kinds of love for you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate everything.
Well, and thank you, Ryan. Kick some butt in your fight. Hopefully I'll be there. Gary, thank you for being who you are in the Southeast Ohio region. And thank you both for being what you are in both of your regions and continue jiu-jitsu, MMA, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, and being the guys that you are. I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Take it easy.
Yep.
All right, man.